The earthquake destroyed our neighborhood, leaving buildings in ruins. As survivors gathered, HOA President Patricia spotted my disabled daughter, Sophia. "You ugly little cripple!" she screamed, lifting a massive concrete slab and hurling it directly at my child. The sickening crack of Sophia's collarbone breaking echoed through the room. Patricia would regret her cruelty forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also, like and subscribe for more stories. The earthquake shattered our peaceful neighborhood at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I woke to my daughter Sophia's terrified screams echoing from her bedroom down the hall. Our walls swayed violently as I stumbled through the darkness, stepping over fallen furniture and broken glass to reach her. "Sophia," I called out, my heart racing. "I'm coming. Hold on." At 16, my daughter's severe cerebral palsy made it impossible for her to get out of bed without help. When I finally reached her room, the sight of her terrified face in the dim glow of her battery-powered nightlight nearly broke me. Her body was trapped in twisted bed sheets as the room continued to shake around us. "Dad, please," she cried, reaching for me with trembling hands. I scooped her into my arms and hurried outside just as our living room ceiling began to collapse. All around us, neighbors poured from damaged homes in panic as aftershocks rippled through the ground beneath our feet. I gently placed Sophia on a patch of grass away from trees or power lines, wrapping her in the blanket I grabbed during our escape. By dawn, our neighborhood looked like a war zone. Many homes had collapsed entirely, while others stood damaged beyond repair. Emergency crews worked tirelessly, pulling survivors from rubble and fighting fires that had broken out from ruptured gas lines. Our own house had partially collapsed. The roof caved in over Sophia's bedroom. We had escaped just in time. The Red Cross established an emergency shelter in our community center, the only large building in the area that remained structurally sound. By noon, we had joined dozens of other displaced families, grateful for CS, blankets, and hot meals. Sophia's special wheelchair had been crushed in the collapse, so I carried her everywhere, or used a standard wheelchair borrowed from medical volunteers, though it lacked the supports her body needed. "Sorry I'm so much trouble," Sophia whispered as I helped adjust her uncomfortable position in the unfamiliar chair. "Don't ever say that," I told her fiercely. "You're the strongest person I know." Despite her physical limitations, Sophia had never let her disability define her. Her keen mind and artistic talent had always been her true identity. Before the earthquake, she'd been preparing for an online art showcase featuring her digital artwork, created using the special computer setup I'd built that she could control with minimal hand movements. 3 days after the disaster, FEMA representatives arrived to assess damage and help coordinate longer-term housing solutions. That same day, the local homeowners association called an emergency meeting in the community center to discuss neighborhood recovery efforts. As treasurer of the HOA, I needed to attend. So I positioned Sophia's wheelchair near the back of the meeting room where she could draw in her sketchbook, one of the few possessions we'd salvaged from our ruined home. Patricia Westfield, the HOA president, took charge immediately. A woman in her 50s with immaculately colored blonde hair that somehow remained perfect despite the disaster. Patricia had always ruled our HOA meetings with iron determination. Her own home, set on the highest point of our neighborhood, had suffered only minor damage. "Order, please," she called, tapping her pen against a water bottle. "We must maintain structure even in crisis." For the next hour, Patricia outlined her vision for neighborhood recovery, which seemed suspiciously focused on restoring the community's aesthetic appeal rather than addressing residents' immediate needs. When elderly Mr. Garvey asked about prioritizing repairs for the most vulnerable homeowners, Patricia dismissed the idea. "We must maintain property values above all." She insisted selective repairs would be unfair to those who pay the highest HOA dues. I felt my blood pressure rising as she continued. Even during a disaster, Patricia's priorities were disturbingly clear. Appearances mattered more than people. When the formal meeting ended, residents broke into smaller groups, discussing immediate needs and sharing resources. I was speaking with our neighbor, Mrs. Chun, about sharing generator power when a sudden commotion caught everyone's attention. Patricia's voice cut through the chatter, sharp and hostile. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I turned to see her standing over Sophia, who looked up from her sketchbook with confusion. "I'm just drawing," my daughter replied softly. Patricia's face twisted with disgust as she snatched the sketchbook. This area is for official HOA business only, not for entertainment. She glanced at the drawing, a beautiful rendering of neighbors helping each other clear debris. And this is absolutely not an appropriate depiction of our community in crisis. I hurried over. Patricia, please give my daughter back her sketchbook. She's not bothering anyone. This is exactly the problem with certain elements in our neighborhood. Patricia continued as if I hadn't spoken, addressing the nearby residents. No respect for procedures, for aesthetics, for common decency. She gestured dismissively at Sophia. And frankly, displaying disabilities so publicly makes our community look distressed. A shocked silence fell over the room. Even those who normally cowered before Patricia seemed stunned by her cruelty. Are you serious right now? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. We've just lost everything in an earthquake, and you're worried about how my daughter's disability affects the neighborhood's image. Patricia's gaze hardened. Crisis doesn't excuse a lack of standards, Mr. Harris. Perhaps this is why your portion of the neighborhood has always been problematic. Some people simply don't belong in a premium community. Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she tried to make herself smaller in the wheelchair. I reached for the sketchbook, but Patricia pulled it away. This will be confiscated until the end of the meeting, she declared, turning away. Something in me snapped. After days of stress, fear, and uncertainty, this petty display of power was too much. Give it back now, I demanded, stepping forward. Patricia retreated toward the partially damaged section of the community center, where construction materials had been stored for emergency repairs. Large pieces of concrete slabs from the damaged wall were stacked nearby, waiting to be cleared. You're being hysterical, Patricia said coldly. This kind of emotional instability is exactly. She never finished her sentence because Sophia had wheeled herself forward. Please, Mrs. Westfield, my daughter said with dignity despite her tears. That drawing is for the memorial wall for Mr. Rivera, who died saving children from the school collapse. I promised his family. Patricia looked down at the sketchbook, then at Sophia, her expression changing from surprise to something darker. Well, she said with cruel deliberation, I suppose it takes someone damaged to want to memorialize destruction. She tore the page from the sketchbook and crumpled it. This kind of depressing imagery isn't what our community needs right now. How dare you, Mrs. Chin exclaimed, stepping forward. That girl has more talent and heart than you'll ever have. Patricia's face flushed with anger at being challenged publicly. She glanced at the construction materials beside her, then did something unimaginable. She bent down, grabbed a large, jagged concrete slab from the pile. It must have weighed at least 20 pounds, and with a look of pure contempt, hurled it directly at my daughter. Maybe this will give you something real to draw about. You ugly little cripple, she screamed. Time seemed to slow. I lunged forward but knew I wouldn't reach Sophia in time. The heavy slab struck her directly in the chest and shoulder, knocking her, wheelchair backward. The sound of her scream mixed with the terrible crack of breaking bone echoed through the room. Sophia. I reached her as she slumped sideways, blood already soaking through her shirt where the rough concrete edge had torn into her collarbone. The room erupted in chaos. Two off-duty nurses who had been at the meeting rushed to Sophia's side while others physically restrained Patricia, who seemed shocked by her own actions, yet continued to rant about standards and property values. Someone call the police, Mrs. Chin shouted, already dialing on her phone, and an ambulance. I could barely breathe as I held my daughter's hand while the nurses assessed her injuries. Stay with me, sweetheart, I begged as Sophia's eyes fluttered. It hurts, Dad, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know baby help is coming, I promised. My own vision blurred with tears of rage and fear. The next hours passed in a blur of sirens, emergency rooms, and police statements. Sophia had suffered a broken collarbone, a fractured shoulder, and a deep laceration requiring 27 stitches. X-rays confirmed that if the concrete had hit her just 2 inches higher, it would have struck her neck or head with potentially fatal consequences. Patricia was arrested at the scene and charged with assault with a deadly weapon with a hate crime enhancement due to her explicit targeting of Sophia's disability. The entire incident had been captured on multiple cell phones, leaving no doubt about what had transpired. While Sophia underwent surgery to repair her shattered collarbone, our community transformed overnight. Families we barely knew appeared at the hospital with clothes, food, and offers of shelter. An online fundraiser for Sophia's medical expenses and our housing needs exceeded its goal within hours as the video of the attack spread across social media. 3 days later, as Sophia recovered in her hospital bed, a group of neighborhood teenagers arrived with a surprise. They had salvaged her computer equipment from our damaged home and repaired it, so she could continue her digital art. Their parents had pulled resources to rent a fully accessible apartment for us once Sophia was discharged. "We want you to know that woman doesn't represent our neighborhood," said Mrs. Chin, who had organized much of the support. "Your daughter belongs here more than Patricia ever did." Meanwhile, the broader impact of the incident continued to unfold. The county suspended our HOA's authority pending investigation after finding evidence that Patricia had systematically discriminated against elderly, disabled, and minority residents for years. Former board members came forward with stories of being bullied into supporting her discriminatory policies. 2 weeks later, when Sophia was strong enough to leave the hospital, we were escorted to our temporary apartment by a parade of neighbors. They had decorated the entrance with an art display featuring copies of Sophia's work, including a recreation of the memorial drawing Patricia had destroyed. At the center of the display hung a framed statement from the community: "Beauty is found in strength, kindness, and resilience, not in perfection." Sophia Harris embodies the best of our community. Patricia's trial 6 months later was brief but impactful. The video evidence was damning, and her own courtroom behavior, continuing to insist that maintaining community standards justified her actions, only strengthened the prosecution's case. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison for the assault with additional penalties for civil rights violations. The concrete slab that had caused so much pain became a symbol of transformation. After being held as evidence, it was given to a local sculptor who, with Sophia's blessing, incorporated it into a public art installation at the rebuilt community center. The rough edges that had cut my daughter were smoothed away, and the piece became the foundation for a beautiful mosaic reading from brokenness. We built strength together. Today, 1 year after the earthquake that destroyed our homes and the attack that could have destroyed our faith in humanity, we live in a newly rebuilt house modified for Sophia's needs and partially funded by community donations. Sophia's art career has taken off with her digital paintings featured in a national disability advocacy campaign. She still bears a scar on her collarbone, but she deliberately wears necklines that don't hide it. "It's part of my story now," she told a journalist who interviewed her about her rising success. "But it's not the most important part. The most important part, as she explains it, is what happened after how a community chose compassion over cruelty, inclusion over isolation, and how even the heaviest stones thrown at us can become stepping stones to something better." As for me, I've become the president of our neighborhood's new community association, which replaced the disbanded HOA. Our first official act was to establish a disaster preparedness fund specifically prioritizing vulnerable residents. Our second was to commission Sophia to design our new logo, a simple image of diverse hands joined together, lifting each other up. Sometimes when I see my daughter smiling as she creates art with the neighborhood children who now gather regularly at our home, I think about that terrible day when hatred and concrete rained down on her. I remember my fear that she might not survive, followed by my determination that she would not just survive, but thrive. Patricia's concrete slab was meant to crush my daughter's spirit along with her body. Instead, it became the foundation upon which Sophia built something much stronger, a platform where her voice, her art, and her unique perspective could reach and touch others. In the end, the ugly truth is that hatred and prejudice exist even in the midst of crisis. But the beautiful truth that my remarkable daughter taught our community is this: what defines us is not what others throw at us, but what we choose to build from the pieces.